Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AI and Data Show. My name is Matthew Holman. I'm a partner here at Crips. It's great to see so many of you tuning in today. We've got a brilliant show lined up for you. If you've never watched the AI and Data Show before, it is a free monthly webinar run by Crips that is all about the intersection between AI, data ethics, information rights, IP, tech law. And we're going to spend the next 45 minutes showing you all of the things that we have prepared, including See It, Say It, SAR It, a study on the Sky Bet case for consent, and special guest Zoe Webster is in the chair taking my questions and yours about what organisations should be doing regarding AI deployment and the workplace. Let's get straight to See It, Say It, SAR It. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this, it's just a little thing we've been doing for a bit of fun and also to help give us some really good practical examples of organisations who perhaps aren't complying as best they could with the law. To update you very quickly, most of you know that I tried to buy Oasis tickets and failed. I, in the process, had my data protection rights infringed. I reported this to the ICO, and in the last show, the ICO came back and told the Oasis production company that they had to respond to me and tell me what they were doing with my data. We then got this non-compliant response from them. Now, I haven't put that up on the screen, at least I won't do it in this show. But since that, the ICO have been back in touch, and they have said that they have seen the Oasis production company's response and it isn't compliant with the law. So we go again. We wait to see what will happen with the Oasis production company. Tune into another show to find out. You may also remember that on a previous show, myself and Elliot Fry were talking all about DeepSeek and what it could do. We compared its functionality between ChatGPT and DeepSeek to look at all of that. And at the end, we decided to SAR DeepSeek just to see what they would come back with. And you might remember they responded with a script that was basically all in Mandarin. We then converted it into English and realized that it wasn't giving us any of the answers that the law entitled us to. So I sent a follow-up request to DeepSeek saying, hey, could you possibly honour my data subject access request? They sent me this response back. Look at that. It's the bit in yellow. It's terrifying. Please specify what data you need. Not, hello, Matthew, or thank you for your request, or we're sorry we didn't respond. No, just tell us what you need. Well, I'm a little bit scared by that. So I'm probably going to hold off from continuing to SAR them, unless you guys think we should, in which case, please put some comments in the Q&A box and we'll maybe keep exploring it later. I've also been SARing OpenAI, more on that to follow soon. And here is the most recent one. Well, like you, I get lots of annoying business email spam marketing in my work inbox. Here is one that I got on the 14th of March, so from the last show to now, only 2 weeks. And it's a company called Super Data Science. I don't know who they are. And you'll see at the bottom, they've put this sort of jokey, gimmicky unsubscribe request. They say, hard pass, reply unsubscribe, and I'll ghost you faster than an ex with commitment issues. I mean, what kind of unsubscribe request is that? Not only do I not want whatever it is you're selling, but I, at the very least, I'm not sure what it is you're asking me to do here. I obviously ignored it. And then very soon after that, got another one. Did you get a chance to review my previous spam message? And then look at this at the bottom. Here's a new unsubscribe statement. They say, if you're over it, reply unsubscribe, and I'll disappear quicker than a co-worker at 4:59 on a Friday. What on earth? Obviously, you've never met my co-workers. Again, I ignore this. And then I get another spam message. This is getting very irritating now. This is only about a week or so later. Basically the same stuff, selling me AI training that I and the organization don't want or need. And at the bottom they say, inbox full, reply nope, and we'll take the message literally. Well, I'm not sure you are taking the message because I haven't responded to any of your spam. And then yesterday, I get this in my inbox. You can see their date and timestamp. Hi, Matthew, I'm still reaching out about our services. I know you're quite busy, so please select from the following. 1, yes, I'm interested. Let's set up a meeting. Pausing there, haven't responded to any of your messages. 2, reach out for 3 months. No, number 3, no, stop emailing me. And at the bottom, yet another unsubscribe variation. Here they say, not feeling it. Reply no thanks, and we'll respect the unsubscribe and respect the unsubscribe code of honor. Now, I was feeling in a somewhat mischievous mood yesterday, so I decided to respond with this message. Dear name, thanks for your email. How about 4? Where did you get my details and what is your lawful basis for continuing to email me at work? Please treat this as a subject access request pertaining to the question alone. And then at the bottom, just for good measure, I said, not enjoying a SAR? Stop spamming hardworking business people then. If you want to find out, let's come back in through. If you want to find out what on earth that generates, then tune in shortly. They have a month to respond per Articles 12 and 15 of the GDPR. It's obviously a bit of fun, but it's a good way of seeing how not to comply with data protection law. If you have seen something in your world that doesn't look quite right, then send it to us at seeitsayitsari@crips.co.uk, and we will investigate the data protection compliance, and who knows, maybe we'll show it on another show. Let's move on to some training. A lot of you have been asking about the Sky Bet case, which is better known as RTM versus Bonterre and Hestview Limited. RTM is the data subject, Bonterre and Hestview are the trading names of Sky Bet. Now, this is a very detailed case, and I'm going to try and do some training for you, but I'm conscious that we have a limited amount of time, so I'll show you as much as I can of the bits that I think are fascinating, interesting, or useful for our work. The summary of the case really on a page is firstly to say it's very complicated, and secondly to stress that it spans both old and new regimes. So it covers the Data Protection Act 98 and it covers the UK GDPR. It relates specifically to consent in the context of direct marketing, and it pertains to the gambling website Sky Bet. So that's the important context and background. This is a case that is very much tainted by and framed from the context of online gambling. There are associated topics tackled as well. So cookies, processing notices, consent banners, profiling activities of users, all of these things are addressed in the case. But perhaps the most important thing it does is explore the contours of the interpretation of consent in the GDPR. There aren't too many cases that we have that take a really deep dive, almost a surgical dive, into the nature of consent at its most detailed and what the law has to say about it. And perhaps one of the most important things to take away is the need to be able to evidence consent. Now, if you are an in-house lawyer, data protection practitioner, or anyone involved in an organization where data privacy is important for you, then this is a case that you need to know about vis-a-vis consent. Very briefly, some facts. The data subject RTM was a self-diagnosed gambling addict, and trigger warning for anyone who has any issues with gambling addiction or knows anyone who does. This is a case that doesn't spare any details in its write-up. It's a fairly horrific expose of the harms that online gambling can cause, and the judgment, which is from Justice Collins Rice, spends a lot of time on the detail for good reason. It frames the context for her later judgment. In essence, the data subject starts gambling in 2017 and gambles all the way through to 2019, at which point he self-rehabilitates and breaks the habit. He then starts to campaign about the behavior of online gambling companies, which results in this case. One of the main arguments he makes, both in the case and in his campaigning, is that the direct marketing behavior of companies like Sky Bet has a self-fulfilling element to it. The more marketing you get, the more you gamble. The more you gamble, the more marketing you get. The more marketing you get, the more drawn into this addictive and compulsive behavior you become. And so it's a dangerous downward spiral. That's the factual background to this case. Now, in this table, you will see a quick summary of the data protection claims that are made by the case. On the left-hand column, these are the activities of processing that Sky Bet were carrying out. After that is a summary of the lawful bases which are available for them. Then you have what the data subject said was happening, and then you had after that what Sky Bet said was happening. Now, the first is processing data for bets. The lawful basis is performance of a contract, the contract being a regulated contract for gambling. The data subject says, yes, this is fine, you have a legal basis, and so does Sky Bet. After that, there is this sudden divergence where they essentially disagree on everything. For example, the processing of data for cookies, for profiling, for direct marketing, emails, pop-ups and push notifications. All of that requires consent. The data subject said that you could have relied on consent, but you didn't actually get my consent in this moment. Even though I ticked on the box saying, yes, please, I wasn't actually consenting at all. Confused? Well, stay with me, we'll try and explain it. Sky Bet said you absolutely did consent. You ticked the box, therefore consent can be proved. There are additional things to argue about too, so processing of special category personal data pertaining to health. The data subject said you should have known I was ill because of my behavior. You were able to track everything I was doing on this digital platform, so you would have been able to see the regularity with which I was gambling, the hours in which I was gambling, the amounts with which I was gambling, all of which should have been evidence of special category personal data. Sky Bet said actually we know some but not all. You know, there is a limit to what we can tell about you because you were on the other side of a screen and therefore that much more removed from us. Other allegations of breach of PECA, and finally the predictable MOPI claim, misuse of private information, the tort born from the case of Vidal Hall and Google 2015. So these are all the things that are happening in this very detailed and complex case. I'm going to move us on to consent because that's what we're here to talk about. This case certainly, to some extent, evolves the understanding of consent. I wouldn't say it changes the definition because I don't think that's quite right, but it definitely gives us perhaps a new prism through which to view it. The decision takes, there are three elements to it. There is the three elements to consent, I should say. There is a very surgical, atomized analysis of the nature of consent from Collins Rice. She says that there is firstly the subjective element to consent. This is what is actually happening in the mind of the data subject when they click on the box in question. What did they think was happening? When you see the word specific in the UK GDPR definition of consent, that's what specific means. It is asking you what is the subjective element of their decision making. Now, clearly that is incredibly hard for any corporate to demonstrate, which is why it's counterbalanced against this second element, the objective autonomy of the individual. This relates to their free will, their desire to act, and the context in which they acted. Did they have a privacy notice? Were they given opportunities to meet the legal standard? And if they did they go on to do so? When we see the words freely given and informed in the definition of consent in the GDPR, which is in Article 411, I'm sure you all know, that's what we're talking about. Freely given and informed are talking about the objective autonomy of the individual. Finally, we have this third element, the evidential burden of consent. The controller must be able to demonstrate all of the points above, particularly the objective autonomy. When we see the words unambiguous indication of wishes in consent definition of the GDPR, that's what we're talking about. Now, clearly there's a lot of detail there, and this is a very theoretical analysis, almost academic analysis of what the nature of consent is about. It's important for you to know it as data protection geeks and practitioners if you're helping organizations to know what consent is, because whilst you wouldn't ever expect to necessarily talk to them about this stuff in this level of detail, it is important that you know what it is because it will inform whether or not consent is working or not. And I would suggest that a lot of this is transferable, although it needs, it certainly needs translating for the average lay business client. Outcomes. Well, it won't surprise you to learn that Sky Bet lose this case. All three elements that we discussed were missing from the consent placed, even though the boxes were ticked at the point in time by the data subjects. Why? Well, we'll try and unpack that. His subjective consent was not there because of his gambling addiction. The objective element also failed on account of the gambling addiction. He would just navigate past anything that he saw in order to get his gambling fix. In other words, at no point was his subjective mind thinking, what am I agreeing to? And his objective action and a free will expression of that. He was so consumed by the habit of gambling that it was simply impossible for him to have given consent. Finally, and perhaps most importantly for all of us on this show, and for all of you watching, the evidential element of what Sky Bet was doing was missing. They presented in evidence a spreadsheet with a time and date stamp showing what had happened. This is what Collins Rice said. She said, exactly what the data subject did cannot with any confidence be inferred from the spreadsheet of evidence I saw and the interpretive evidence I was offered. the spreadsheet is largely a matter of speculation. And for a lot of you, I imagine that's quite surprising, because I imagine for a lot of you, that is what you would be relying on for consent. No one is actually checking that the spreadsheet is right. I suppose the better question is, what does the spreadsheet actually show? In the case, you get later argumentation around, well, if I'm on a device and I click on a button, have I consented, or has someone on my device clicked at some point in time? Was it me or another? All of this stuff gets played out. More than anything, it's a good reminder of why we should work really hard to capture as best possible the evidence that consent has happened. Some important takeaways. Well, remember the elements of consent. Remember the interesting granular detail that the case goes into. If you are advising on any cases or have any in-house matters or clients looking to you for advice on consent, you need to know about the Sky Bet case. You should be going to look at it, and you should be letting that inform your thinking about it, at least in a generic way, and at least taking into account some of the elements that were described. Consent is a business risk. Here's a really interesting part from the judgment at paragraph 197 for all of you who complain about, or have organisations where people complain about consent. Check this out from Justice Collins Rice. She says, the carriage of legal risk regarding consent is a matter for the business. It has to make choices about how cookies and direct marketing work, and about the people whose personal data it uses. It has many resources to assist it in doing so. It has regulatory standards to help modify or suppress its marketing or its consent mechanisms at a more granular level should it choose to do so. In other words, a lot of this stuff is within the gift of the corporation, and a lot of the weight and expectation on obtaining consent resides properly there. Finally, some parts of this case are fact specific in their outcome, and the judge was very keen to stress that actually this case is somewhat unique to its facts, especially regarding the complete obfuscation of consent on the part of the data subject around the objective element. The background of his gambling addiction taints a lot of the decision making. So whilst you should definitely come away from this case thinking it's useful regarding consent, and we should know about the three elements of the nature of consent, I wouldn't take it to significant extremes, because ultimately some of what this decision shows us is specific very much to online gambling. I also found some really interesting nuggety bits at the end. We don't have too long to look at them, but I'll show you the ones I liked. They are cookies. The judge is very critical of a rubbish cookie banner that just says go and sort out your browser settings if you don't want to receive cookies. The know your customer bit, I mean, one of the things that the case shows us is just how little Sky Bet knew about the data subject until the case. The judge is critical of this and says, actually, if you knew a lot more about your customers, some of this could have been avoided. And finally, privacy notices will be unfair if they are inconsistent as to their terms. So where a privacy notice suggests that consent is relied on, but in actual fact, a legitimate interest is relied on, it is likely to be an unfair notice. And some of that chimes quite neatly with what the ICO was saying in the TikTok fine that we digested last year. That case is coming up for trial in May. Let's come back into the room, and that's the end of the session that we have on Sky Bet. If you have any questions about the nature of consent or any of the things we've touched on there, then please do send them in on the Q&A. We'll do our best to get to them. If we can't, then we'll do our best to get to you afterwards. Now, we are going to do the next section of the show, and I am thrilled to welcome to the studio our special guest, Zoe Webster. Zoe, welcome to the AI and Data Show.
Thank you, Matthew.
You have the most amazing CV, which I'm just going to read out briefly for our viewers. So you advise organisations on AI strategy and practice, and you are currently running your own consultancy business. But before that, as of up to May last year, you led BT's AI Centre for Enablement, which you built from scratch amidst the wider programme of digital transformation. You also worked for Innovate UK, where you led a team to accelerate the use of enabling and emerging technology, including AI. You also have a PhD in AI, and in 2023 you gave evidence to the House of Lords Communication and Digital Committee on the opportunities and risks of large language models, all of which I think makes you the perfect person to be in the chair today.
Gosh, thank you.
However, it is compulsory that every special guest is asked a series of random icebreaker questions. Is it okay if I hit you with some questions?
Yes, sure.
Excellent. Right. in no particular order. What is your favourite book and who is your favourite author?
I recently read, I love comedy, so I recently read Bob Mortimer's The Satsuma Complex, which I really liked. I think he's got another book out, so I'm going to check that out. So I'm going to say he's my favourite author.
What a legend. Bob Mortimer is an absolute legend. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Go back in time a little bit on occasion.
Excellent. Would you rather live in the world of Harry Potter or the Marvel Universe?
I don't know much about the Marvel Universe. I've just read all the Harry Potter books to my youngest, so I would say Harry Potter. Me and my youngest, we both like to be at Hogwarts.
Oh, hear, hear. Any of you who know me well will know that I want to be at Hogwarts too. What is your favourite season of the year and why?
Autumn. I like the kind of comfiness, the food available, and kicking leaves.
Finally, which character from the sitcom Friends are you most like?
I think I'm a combination of Monica and Phoebe. I think in a kind of pub quiz scenario, I turn to Monica quite quickly, but generally I'm a bit more Phoebe, I would suggest.
An excellent combination. Well, thank you for answering those questions and welcome to the AI and Data Show. Now, let's start talking a little bit about your career. How did you end up doing what you're doing now?
Well, it started when I was a teenager, kind of reading my dad's Isaac Asimov books, so kind of really trying to get to the point of what's the difference between a robot and a human. That got me into computer science, and I specialised in AI. So I'm very much, I describe myself as kind of classically trained in that regard. Did my master's degree, my PhD when I was working in a research lab, and at that time no one was really talking about AI apart from those of us who were kind of doing the research. So it was about convincing people, demonstrating what the algorithms could do. So building things from scratch, loved doing that, and then showing them on some interesting applications. Then kind of wanted to broaden out, went to Innovate UK, as you mentioned, looking at the impact of business innovation on the economy, on society, what that means for the individual business, but how we can accelerate and get businesses innovating more, including in collaboration with each other. And then I got the opportunity to join BT to kind of build a new team, drawing on the heritage that BT have in the AI space, but really for the first time bringing together that scale, that kind of rigor, to make sure AI use cases can be addressed much more quickly and into production. So being able to kind of build a team and lead a team, particularly when everything was changing in AI around ChatGPT and generative AI more generally, that was super interesting. So quite a long career in terms of AI, but yeah, been about a bit.
I love the reference to Isaac Asimov, by the way. To everyone, I mean, check out the books; they're just amazing as well. Like, if you haven't read any of his work, then you should definitely do so. A lot of organisations are trying to deploy AI right now. What 2 or 3 trends have you seen most recently?
Well, unfortunately, because I've become an independent consultant, I wanted to help more organisations and on their journey of AI, and certainly noticed there are things that are going on. Certainly, one trend is people are using generative AI, mainly large language models in the workplace, often for generating documents, often for retrieving documents and data from where it might be in the workplace. So we're seeing that more and more, starting to see more talk of agentic AI, albeit I would argue perhaps not true agency, more following simple pre-scripted tasks. So I think we're also seeing, or I've noticed a trend still for this kind of top-down, you will use AI, and this will be an AI-first organisation, which I'm not sure makes any sense. That's very tech push, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the most successful. There's still an appetite to use AI more and more, but actually, interestingly, another trend is not many organisations have an AI strategy or an AI policy. So what are the priorities? How is an organisation going to address this? And then when it is using AI, what's the guidance, what's the standards, what's the policy that should be in place to make sure it's done really well?
I've heard it said before, and I know we've talked a little bit about it, that AI, sometimes AI is quoted as being a solution looking for a problem.
Yes.
Now, I'm not sure that's always the case, but I can certainly have sympathy with certain organisations who may feel that way. How do you see AI changing the nature of work over the next few years? And I suppose, killer question, is AI going to take all our jobs?
I'm somewhat sceptical of a lot of the forecasts around, massive changes in quite a short amount of time. I think it's going to take far longer, partly because I think we underestimate or underplay the role of the human. So, when we're operating with a process or a system, the number of workarounds we need to employ to kind of get things to work, the extra buttons we need to press, the chats in the corridor that lead to adjustments that make something happen. And I think we underplay that. And of course, that's not all going to be captured by the digital, by the AI. And I think that's something we need to watch for. And until we fully understand that, I don't think we're going to be able to replace, even if we wanted to replace people wholesale. So I think the changes we see will be gradual. There will be some tasks that people undertake that are, the dull, the dangerous, the very repetitive stuff that we can do. Dirty, that was the other, dirty, dangerous, dull. Some of that will go, but that was probably always going to happen. I think I don't see this kind of large-scale replacement, certainly no time soon. I think some of the forecasts have been over-optimistic. There will be, as any technological innovation, there will be some new jobs and there'll be some that get changed or disappear, but I think that'll take longer than many of the forecasts.
Indeed. Zoe and I first met on a panel at the Cabinet Office talking to the Science and Engineering Committee on frontiers of science, and in that panel discussion it was said that if AI is the solution that wipes out all of our jobs, then it will be the first technological revolution to do so. The data tends to show actually that with every next step there is an ever increasing amount of work. It may be different work. We may not know what that work is, but there is likely to be more than less.
Quite.
So in light of what we discussed, how should organisations approach their AI strategy?
So I think first of all, go back to what the organisation's there to do and what its priorities are. And the priorities might be to generate more revenue, to cut costs, to better mitigate risks, to improve customer satisfaction. It might be a whole range of things. So putting AI to one side, what is it you're trying to do, and then think about, okay, what efficiencies might there be? What insight from data might be really helpful in doing that? And that's where AI may have a role. So it's starting not with AI, but with what you're trying to do. Really broaden your outlook of AI. It's not just large language models. It's not just agents. It's far broader. So try not to kind of go into a particular technology unless you must. And also engage as early as possible. When you're thinking about an opportunity, engage with those who are most likely to be impacted as soon as possible, to kind of really understand what it is, what the nature of the opportunity is, and to really bring them on board so you're not imposing on them, you're working and collaborating with them.
We will shortly be taking your questions for Zoe and all things to do with AI and the workplace and deployment. So if you have any questions, now is the time. Please fire them into the Q&A function on the screen in front of you. I will take those questions or receive them, on the iPad in front of me, and I'll put them straight to Zoe. But before we do, last question. What 2 or 3 top tips would you give for successful AI deployment? And I suppose conversely, what should organisations not be doing?
So going back, don't try and be AI first. Don't try and fit, AI to everything, no matter what the opportunity might be. I think experimentation is really important, and so spending the time, investing the time in really well-crafted experiments that really draw out the data and the information, partly about what I said earlier about what it is the human does and what the value is that the human brings, but making sure the AI has value where it needs to, either crunching through lots of data very quickly or finding patterns that aren't very clear to the human eye. So write down your, what's the hypothesis you're trying to test? What are your assumptions? What are the limitations of what you're trying to do? And write that down from the very start. It's something I've always asked teams to do because it sets out the scene, it avoids any misapprehension or misunderstandings a bit later, and it really tests, what is it we're trying to achieve here. So that's a big one, but that takes some investment. So being a bit more like a scientist in your approach, and actually, setting that out and then moving forward.
The importance of the scientific method and the need to capture, to measure, without measuring, how will you know if something is improving or not, going up or down, or whatever your metric is, equally as important to this as to any other scientific endeavour.
Absolutely.
We have questions. Thank you to those of you who've been tapping away. There is still time to throw questions in, so please feel free to do so. Some questions on the RTM Skybet case. I might pick those up at the end if we have time, but we've got some good questions here already. One of them says, as it is tariff day, if we wanted to avoid US AI systems, what are the alternatives to Silicon Valley? That's a tricky question. Yeah,
That gets quite political quite quickly.
I feel like we're not here to recommend AI solutions, I suppose. And one of the great things about the AI and Data Show is that it's completely independent and has no biases in any direction. So ultimately, it's for you to explore. But there are other solutions out there, and we've already talked a little bit in previous shows about solutions from other parts of the world, and hopefully one day soon we'll have a burgeoning UK AI economy that you could choose from if you wanted to. Will AI replace lawyers specifically?
I have to be mindful of where I'm sat.
You might get lynched. There's lawyers all over the place over here.
I don't think AI is going to really replace many jobs at all, many whole roles, and that there's a huge amount that lawyers, as I understand it, having worked alongside lawyers and had the benefit of learning from their wisdom, I don't see a machine doing all of that. There's a lot of craft to it. There's a lot of interpretation. And as we know now, not everything we get from AI is necessarily accurate. So, being able to have that ability to think creatively, to problem solve, and to think critically is really important. And I don't see machines replacing that in the near future.
What would you say to people that suggest that AI will stifle innovation rather than enhance it?
I think it is a really interesting question. I think in some cases, AI can be a creative force. It can generate things that may not be coming from a human, and I think that's helpful. And some AI is actually designed to do that, to kind of create a divergent set of solutions from which someone can make sense and choose from. So actually, in that in that regard, it can support innovation, because we're going to see a lot more AI in science more generally, being able to crunch through and run experiments. And get to new drugs, new forms of materials and things like that much more quickly. I do worry sometimes about the impact it might have on cognition for people if they're leaning on AI more and more to do some of their tasks, to do some of their thinking, and what impact that might have on human creativity going forward. So I think that's something we have to watch. But it could go either way, and it probably will go both ways, depending on the application.
Well, here's a question that's just dropped in as well. Do you think AI will make human beings less intelligent? I suppose it's sort of carrying on from the same theme.
I think it wouldn't be AI doing it. It would be people making decisions about using AI and how it's used. So no technology is responsible for doing this. It comes down to people. How it's used in schools and education more generally. I think there's a risk of that potentially, but it really depends on how this technology is harnessed.
It does. I suppose we could expand it as somewhat more into the conceptual, ethical around AGI and the potential what ifs of the AI evolution, if you want to call it that. Where there's this quote from Kissinger that says, if an AI system is created that is able to know and understand the things that no human could ever know or understand, is knowledge receding away from us. This idea that maybe if humans are becoming less intelligent, perhaps it's by measure to the machines which are becoming that much more intelligent, to a point where it's simply impossible to know what they are doing. Wouldn't that be scary / cool? Let's pick another one out of this awesome list. Thank you for everyone who's putting questions in. Please continue to do so. One of them is, we are using ChatGPT to sift CVs. Is that okay?
Well, it's interesting because people are using it to write CVs as
Indeed.
well. And
Yeah.
I think I've seen that myself when recruiting. It's quite difficult. You see these very perfect looking CVs and you think, I'm not entirely sure. I worry about using it to sift CVs, certainly without validation. There's all sorts of biases that could be in there, and we kind of, I think most of us are aware of that risk. So how you mitigate that risk would be really critical to that. But I would worry hugely about the use of that kind of technology without proper safeguards in place.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, and it's also probably worth mentioning the EU AI Act and some of the protections around employment harms that can arise from the use of these systems. They are prescribed as high risk in Article 6 of the EU AI Act, so whoever you are, definitely worth thinking about that stuff and making sure that you're compliant with the law and also the ethics of what you're doing. We are constantly getting pressure from marketing to create images using Midjourney or similar. We say, I think that's the legal team, there are lots of risks. Have you seen this happening more? What risks should we be aware of?
People are using image generation more and more. And that's to be expected given the ease by which this kind of technology is available. But there are some risks around, I guess, risks around intellectual property infringement and being very mindful about where those images have come from, whatever system you're using, and the rights to use the data it might have been built upon and that content. And again, anything you do to that, have you got the rights to forward that on? So there's partly that, but there's also something around authenticity, I think, more broadly, which is depending on the nature of the images, are you generating images that are meant to show something that's real, or are you showing something that is meant to be kind of fantastical, and that's fine. So depends on the application, but that authenticity is really important to many consumers as well. But certainly IPR and thinking through possible infringement is one of the key areas of risk.
Agreed. We have one question on Sky Bet that I might try and tackle if we can, just with the time we've got, which is that, so great question. Someone says, I'm surprised by the outcome of the case. So even they select consent, if they can select consent, given the subject matter that consent is unambiguous at best, should they ask for more information or about addiction? Well, I think the difficulty with the Sky Bet case is that it could easily be interpreted to extremes that it's not trying to reach itself. One of the many arguments that the case creates is, well, does this extend beyond the boundaries of addiction, or perhaps does it extend more clumsily into areas where people are just generally more weak? So the obvious next scenario that comes to my mind, at least, is teenagers and social media. They will click past anything in order to get onto the platforms they want to get onto. The TikTok case is perhaps the case exemplar of that. Should they be treated in the same way as RTM was in the Sky Bet case? Do they have a similar reduction or diminishment of autonomy? You could keep going with that analogy in all kinds of areas where people are vulnerable. The case is specifically saying it's not doing that, and I would be inclined not to take it there myself, but I could certainly see why academic lawyers might want to try and argue that. It is also tricky, the fact that this person ticked a box and was still found to have not consented definitely shoots a bit of a torpedo into the standard model. Most of us will rely on these processes ad nauseum, and maybe the thing that we're being pointed to by the decision is perhaps to just reevaluate those processes again, to really ask if they are actually doing what we think they're doing. And maybe the big takeaway is to know a bit more about the kind of people you're engaging with. The Sky Bet case is so heavily framed in the context of vulnerable adults with gambling addictions that it would be hard to read it any other way. If you are collecting consent from individuals where you think there is a chance that some of them may suffer from vulnerability, ditto minors as well, then it might be that you should reevaluate and perhaps building risk assessments into your consent capture process. You could also do some sampling around that to start testing your data in, dare I say, a scientific way. Let's end that section there. Thank you to everyone for all of your questions and more. I'm sorry for the ones that we didn't get to, and we will try and follow up with you online afterwards. Thank you very much, Zoe, for taking all of the questions around that. Zoe, by the way, is available and is a fantastic consultant, so I would love to commend her work to you, and please do feel free to reach out to her directly or to find her and follow her on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
It is that part of the show where we end with our amazing AILs, and I'm thrilled to welcome back into the studio Ben, Amy and James. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It's great to see you all. Ben, I might come to you first. What have you seen AI doing in the last month that you have found really interesting?
Sure. Zoe touched on it earlier with the term agentic AI. So last month saw the launch of what's termed Manus AI, which is the first sort of step towards trying to get to this generative agentic AI system. To understand what that means, we sort of need to take a step back to what is ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT is an AI assistant. It's very, very good at conversation, but it's very limited. Agentic AI is the next step. You're taking an AI assistant and you're giving it some tools. So now it can produce documents, it can produce spreadsheets, it can produce websites. So it's trying to get towards that autonomous sort of process driven. But unfortunately, it's still prompt specific.
Okay.
So.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about it and have been playing with it a bit. And one of the obvious use case examples for it is the build a website. The prompt go build a website, because if we were to do that with ChatGPT, we would go on to ChatGPT and say, hey, build me a website. It can't build me a website. What it can do is write about how to build a website. It will give me lots of natural language responses that are incredible. Will look and feel very human-like, but ultimately it's not going to do the thing I want. It's just going to tell me how I can do it.
Yeah.
How is Manus different?
So Manus will create you the entire website. It works exactly like a human would. So you can input your prompt. It will create itself a to-do list. It will execute that to-do list. It will create programming scripts to run applications. It can create APIs, and it will publish you an entire website with your consent.
Wow. Excellent news. And it sounds like a really fascinating solution. Is it? What does it compare to with ChatGPT in terms of response times? We're looking at the same kind of time frame for getting an answer, or is it different?
Yeah. So obviously, with these AI assistants, we're probably used to instantaneous responses. This is much longer. It's much more a deep research sort of tool. So you're looking more towards sort of an hour or so, depending on how big the research task is. But it produces a very comprehensive report, and it also produces all the documents that it has created along its way to your outcome for you to review.
And Ben doesn't know I'm going to do this, but I'm going to embarrass him by thanking him for all of his hard work on all of the things you've done with AI and Data Show. You're moving on from one seat to another, aren't you?
I am, yes.
What seat are you moving on to?
Private wealth.
Well,
yeah.
Ben has to say that's fun, but we all know the truth. Thank you for everything. I'm very grateful. We're all very grateful.
Thank you very much.
Amy, welcome. Good to have you back on the AI and Data Show. What have you seen AI doing in the last 4 weeks?
Yeah, so H&M have revealed plans to use AI to create digital twins of their models. So this will be used in advertising campaigns, and the images will be watermarked so people will be aware of when it's been AI generated. So models will supposedly be able to choose which campaigns they want to be used for, and it's kind of been a bit controversial because some models have said, oh, this is great because we don't have to travel anymore and we can have a bit more control. However, it's kind of possibly been suggested that this might be a bit of a cost-cutting exercise for H&M, so this won't have to pay for photographers or stylists. So the kind of actual benefit for customers is still a little bit unclear.
I mean, it sounds like a really interesting use case, and I suppose one that's going to just start happening more and more and more, particularly in the modelling sector. Thank you, Amy, for that. James, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to see you.
And you.
what have you seen AI doing in the last 4 weeks?
So I and probably many other users in Europe have seen that Meta have introduced their AI features on WhatsApp, and currently they are limited to just text-based in the UK, whereas in the US it also allows image editing and generation, among other things. But the rollout was actually postponed in the EU due to some concerns that were raised by the Irish Data Protection Commission. And since its release, it has actually been quite controversial, mostly because people can't disable it. And one user online actually asked the AI to disable itself, and it came back with a set of steps in response that it appears to have made up and can't be followed. So we'll wait and see how this one plays out, I think.
I'm guessing that pretty much all of you beloved viewers out there have seen the deployment of Meta AI, and I mean, I don't know about you guys. I find it really frustrating. Why do I mean that? Partly because as a parent of 2 teenagers who are both on the younger side of the teenage spectrum, we work pretty hard at corralling and monitoring their digital footprint to make sure that they can't go to places that we as parents don't want them to go to. And one of those things is AI. You know, we say to them, look, you can't go around and play with various systems without our permission. We want to at least have some kind of supervision of what you're doing. And for Meta to just compulsorily drop this into WhatsApp and say, you can't turn this off, here it is, you can chat to it about anything you want on WhatsApp. You know, especially my youngest, we use WhatsApp for communicating as a family all the time. He can now talk to an AI through a system that we don't want him to use, but we can't disable. Although I've been monitoring what he's been saying to it, and frankly, it's quite funny and not in any way dangerous.
Have you noticed any of his responses being more professional recently?
Yes, I mean, he's definitely got more eloquent. Hello, Father. What is for dinner? Etc. etc. AI Elves, thank you very much for your amazing contribution. And we're going to end the show there. And before we do, I should mention that we are not doing an AI and data show televised version in May, so there won't be a webinar like this. Instead, we are going to do the AI and Data Show live, which is being called the AI and Data Show Live. High fives to marketing for that one. It's at the Conduit Club in London, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 20th of May. So it won't be televised, it's an in-person event where I will be interviewing Jamie Suskind and the Right Honourable Sir Robert Buckland about all of the big issues that AI creates for us, focusing particularly on some of the thorniest topics regarding AI ethics. We will also have a panel of in-house lawyers. Expect to see some AI elves floating around as well and talking about all the developments that they've been looking at. Tickets to this are free, but places are limited. So if you would like to come, please register your interest on the link which we'll be sending out after the show. That leaves me to thank all of my guests. A special thank you to Zoe for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom, and thank you to James, Amy and Ben. This has been the AI and Data Show. I've been Matthew Holman. Thank you much for hanging out. See you again soon.